Hello and welcome to the O&M Stockroom. We are your hosts, Brian McGarry.
And Ken O'Malley.
Tonight is episode 15 of Complimentary Cinema. If you are new to the channel, Complimentary Cinema is a program where we review and discuss films that you can watch for free on YouTube. And be warned that we discuss these films in detail. So consider this a full spoiler alert. This week it was my turn to pick, and I actually spent probably the most time I've ever taken to pick a film. I think it was at least 3 whole minutes.
It wasn't long enough.
It wasn't long enough, unfortunately. So it was a sci-fi film, and I like, here's the problem. I like sci-fi. I like the idea of sci-fi.
Mm.
And it's getting me into trouble more often than not. And I ended up picking the 2017 film, The Beyond. In The Beyond is, well, first off, it's directed and written and produced by Hazraf Dalal. If anybody has been listening to this program for a while, you know that we reviewed another of his films a few weeks back called 2036 Origin Unknown. And that was absolutely aggravating to watch, as I recall.
We were not aware that this was the same person.
Making, in many respects, a very thematically similar film. And just in short summary, this was absolutely arduous to get through. So, 2017, Hazraf Dalal, he self-titles himself Haz, which just makes me just dislike the guy already.
Yeah, he does the special effects. And so there's special effects like every minute in this film.
This is a special effects disaster as well, but we'll get to that later. So in the film is a whole bunch of actors I have never heard of or seen before. We have Jane Perry as Jillian LaRue, Nigel Barber as Alex Grant, Noelle Kaminsky as Jessica Johnson, and just a bunch of other random people that we see just kind of briefly here and there. Ken, why don't you go ahead and lay down our basic plot summary here. Get us started.
So this is a movie about an anomaly that appears over the Earth. And it's near the space station. And they call it the Void. And it's basically this big, swirly, sparkly, cloud-looking thing that is just above the Earth. It apparently comes every so often, and it's been studied before, but this is the first time that a human has interacted with it. And in an accident, an astronaut from the space station accidentally gets sucked into the void
while doing a spacewalk,
and that's what begins our adventure with the void.
Yeah, so apparently this void showed up back in 1990. Which is amazing because, I hadn't heard about it, hadn't read about it before, but apparently it was a thing, and it was in space for 2 months. This gigantic, glowing, bright, swirly thing. And it's that kind of detail that just immediately destroys my suspension of disbelief. Set it further into the future, really. When you're going to have something like that, push it further into the future. Another problem I have early on, I'm already critiquing this thing. Our first shot of the International Space Station shows it with 3 of its 4 solar arrays. They used basically public access NASA-produced footage of the space station while it was still being constructed and showed it in what is presumably a future timeline. Like this film came out in 2017. Even if the film was set in 2017, the space station still would have been completed in construction. It had all 4 solar panel sets long before then. But I digress.
I guess when we talk about this movie, the first thing we really need to talk about is the style that it's in, because it informs kind of the whole rest of it. So this is filmed as a straight documentary. So it is presented as a documentary of the space agency that's investigating the anomaly and the people behind who are making the decisions about it. And, basically they're trying to decide how they're going to make contact, if it is some kind of entity, or if it's, just something they need to investigate, or, the military wants to blow it up, of course, because that's what the military is always good for in the story. But that's kind of the way it's presented. It's a straight documentary.
A straight documentary that goes on and on and on. It is 2 hours of talking heads, really. And you see a lot of the same talking heads over and over again. So I'm trying to keep it on track here. So, you have the big swirly thing, right? They don't know what it is. So they start sending probes. The probes vanish, relatively quickly. They're not getting a lot of meaningful data out of it. Could it potentially be a wormhole to another place? They don't know. They decide, well, we have to send people, right? That makes sense. You got to send people to investigate this, right? And then one of the talking heads that we see is this aged Eastern European, theoretical physicist who basically points out that, you can't send people because they'll get like spaghettified by the immense forces and everything. It's like, okay, well, that makes sense too. So naturally, they come up with a plan to basically remove the brains of candidate astronauts and put them in essentially a robot body and then send that through the wormhole, right? Okay, that's interesting enough. Transhumanism is a theme that has, likes to delve into, and certainly very much in this film. So what ultimately, should be a fairly quick process in another film, like say with a good budget and good swift writing, we dwell on the selection process and dwell on the really mundane particulars of finding, the right people and how to integrate them into this technology and to make it work. To the point that you're well in like an hour into the film and basically almost nothing has happened. And you were just, your hands are in your face waiting for it to end.
I think that's the hardest part talking about this film is you could describe it in so few sentences and really capture all the important parts because it's just drag on with every little detail. And it's worth noting, if you made a documentary, if this was a real life event that happened and you made a documentary, this is not how you would make it.
It is not how you would make it.
It would not be boring like this.
I love good documentaries, okay?
A good documentary tells a story still.
And a good documentary does not dwell on the same point repeatedly. I mean, how many times did we hear from how many people that the transplant of the brain into the human 2.0 body was a one-way ticket and it was irreversible?
Yeah.
Probably 4 times.
Right.
That's not something that needs to be continually dwelt upon. I mean, that's pretty obvious from the get-go, and you only need to hear it once, maybe twice to really, underscore it, and then you move on.
I mean, you needed to say it once and then show it, and then it needed to happen. And that would have been, then we would continue on with that new thing as a character. But instead, it took another half an hour to get one of these people in this robot.
And by the time you get there, the payoff for it isn't there.
It literally, they finally get this thing in motion, and they say, okay, now it needs to go through training and whatever. And then it goes 8 days later, and now we're strapping it onto a rocket and firing it into space.
Basically, yeah, the interesting part is what they skipped over. Because the interesting part might have required money to produce. There was a great thing. They did show a brief snippet of, some stock photos of like a NASA training facility and such, or videos, I guess. I don't even remember anymore. And it's amazing how they just straight up blur. They just blur out NASA logos and stuff because the space agency in this film, it's called the Space Agency Incorporated. And they love pretty much between every scene. I mean, this must have happened 20, 30 times where they flash the space agency like test pattern. It was happening so often, like it was making me physically angry. I was getting more angry every time I saw that stupid thing. There was no need for that. Once or twice, okay, cute. 20, 30 times, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
So they couldn't use any of the NASA logos or anything. So instead of like, this guy's, the director's credits are all special effects films. So this is a special effects guy.
Yeah.
He couldn't use Photoshop to maybe just transplant his fake space agency logo onto these things. They just blurred it out in like MS Paint. I mean, it was terrible. And can you regale us of the other Photoshop incident that we saw?
Oh yeah. Early on in the film, there's a like you see in movies where someone shows an old photograph of themselves. And so our first kind of contact, I guess, is the space agency. What's her title? Is it like she's like the mission commander, kind of. She's making the decisions at the space agency.
Director, I guess you could say.
Director.
I mean, it doesn't even matter anymore.
Well, anyway, she's showing an old picture of her and her husband, who apparently has passed away, and they zoom in on the photograph she's holding, which is like the worst Photoshop job I've seen of her face and this other guy's face, who this guy isn't even in the movie.
The guy's never even in the movie.
It didn't matter what his face looked like, and their faces are Photoshopped on, like, facing the wrong directions, and their heads sizes are incorrect for the size of the bodies that they're shopping them into.
You can even kind of make the outline.
You can see
of
the
where
outline.
they cut the face and just pasted the face on and then just kind of blurred around.
Yeah.
I mean, it was bad.
It was really bad.
I mean, we actually paused it and cackled at that for a good 5 minutes.
And it wasn't just because we paused it. They zoomed in on it.
They zoomed in. I mean,
it was like full screen for like not quick, like
for a few
couple
seconds. Yeah.
Yeah.
If they had just glanced at it quickly, like like if she was holding it at arm's length, it could have passed. All right. Just a brief glimpse and then, moved on. That'd have been fine. But no, we're going to get up close and personal with this badly doctored photograph. And the other funny thing too, so this film is set roughly in contemporary times, maybe just a handful of years in the future. And the photo looks like it's like it's supposed to be like from like 1960 or something. Like it's all like faded and old and it's like pretty much monochromatic. And it's like what, like this woman's like 45 years old.
Right.
And like this picture of her on her wedding day, it's like maybe 25 years ago. It's like, come on. That makes no sense. Just a terrible attention to detail.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to slay this film now.
Yeah. Well, okay, and before we move on though, there's more than one scene where they have badly photoshopped pictures then. This is a reoccurring theme.
It is a recurring theme.
It happens with the astronauts later on too, where they just photoshopped some people's faces onto actual astronauts' bodies or something.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
like
anyway.
the orientations are wrong and everything. And that leads to the larger issue with this film. So I even wrote it down in my notes here. We've got the shaky cam going on. We got shaky cam going on left and right. The director never wants the camera to really focus on anything for too long. We're inundated with shaky cam. We're inundated with these bright special effects that make it very hard to discern any real detail in a lot of things. And there's a ridiculous amount of computer screen close-ups. Also, typically out of focus, or at least mostly out of focus. And that is what this entire film looks like. The only time that you don't see that is when they're doing the interview footage for the documentary, when they're talking to people. Anytime there's like an actual event occurring, anytime there's any kind of action, anytime there's a space scene, it is shaky cam and blurry. And it is incredibly hard to watch. The colors are pretty, I'll give them that. And there's never anything to really feast your eyes on because your eyes can never focus on anything. And it's like a really sloppy way to just gloss over how crappy your effects are. I mean, there was definitely some of this in the other film that he made that we watched that was pretty bad. And it's just even worse in this one. It's just even worse.
Yeah. I think in a good movie, you use the visuals to tell a story. And these visuals don't tell a story. They're just completely strange. And like you said, it's shaking and it's not really helping, it's not helping to tell a story. It's just flashy and
What these visuals actively take away from the story. They distract from the story. They're not necessary in many cases. And I just feel like there's just such an emphasis on flash and bright and technology, and it's all for naught. It's like, so like right when we started watching this, you made a really great point about the three things. Ken, can you tell us about the three things?
So there's an old saying in production that you can either have something quick, you can have it high quality, and you can have it cheap, but you can't have all three of them. You got to sacrifice somewhere. And so we made a parallel. You made a parallel.
So with these, so like with these sci-fi films, right? So like you can have like good writing, you can have good special effects, and you can have good acting, right? But you can't have all three with these free YouTube sci-fi movies, right? You can get maybe two of the three. Okay. Now let's review this one first. Now, when we first started watching it, like the special effects seem like they're going to be good. Okay. Like they really, they kind of make you, they trick you into being like, okay, maybe the special effects will be worth it.
They seem competent.
But when you realize that it's so shaky and blurry, it's because they can't render anything at a high enough resolution because they don't have the money or the processing power or the programming talent. So this one doesn't win in that regard. Okay. The writing. It doesn't get that either. Because the writing dwells in spots. The pacing of it is bad. It is mostly a film with exposition, as you were pointing out earlier.
Yeah, it's just all talking heads.
It's just talking,
and that's it.
It's like us talking, but even less interesting.
Yes,
if I may. Okay, and then the third part, is it well acted?
No.
I won't say it was terribly acted. I would say the acting is competent in many of the respects. Competent. Like it's serviceable. I could see these people going on to do other films like Hallmark holiday movies. Okay. I can see them.
High badge of honor.
I can see them in Geico commercials very convincingly. Okay.
I don't know.
What I'm saying is that's the caliber of acting that you have in this film. It's watchable. You can get through it. But the guy who played Alex Grant, Nigel Barber, he was pretty bad. Was
that the guy in
he's
the space
the older
agency?
Yes, he's the old so not that it matters, but he's an older guy who works at Space Agency Incorporated, and he doesn't shut up. And he's
always a negative Nancy.
He's too intense for this film. He does not mesh with this film well at all. He's supposed to be kind of like a source of conflict in the agency of like with just how he is, but he's just annoying. Mm-hmm. And some of the conclusions he comes to, like one of the Human 2.0 candidates being what did he say?
The military ones?
No, about Jessica. Okay,
oh,
so
God, he said she was like a powder keg, or she's gonna go off or something.
This mild-mannered cosmologist,
an astrophysicist,
a cosmologist who's mild-mannered and has no family. He was worried about her being
look at the stars.
And he was worried about her being a. So I mean, so even as a character, he just doesn't make much sense. You could have cut him out, and it would have been a fine movie.
But you could have cut all of them out.
You could have cut all of them,
and it would have been the same movie.
Just about.
You could have put anyone. Anyone can just sit there in front of a camera and talk at a screen. There's no character except for he was the grumpy guy. The lady who was in charge was the kind of middle ground.
She was the Hillary Clinton of the space agency.
She was the middle ground.
I got Hillary Clinton vibes from her.
And then the other guy was like a little bit more positive about things.
none of them had any real personality,
That's what I'm
except
saying,
for
though.
the jerk. I mean, yeah, I mean, none of them. It was just people reciting lines. I know, but that's not necessarily the fault of those actors. Like they were given crap to work with on this.
Yeah. I mean, that's undeniable, but at least there's just not even characters there.
You don't care about. Okay, so
Like, what could you tell me about any of them?
one thing I can say about. Okay, so there's one character that comes to mind. I don't even know what his. I can't even find him on this list in IMDb because there's so many inconsequential people on here. So one scene, relatively early on, they're going through like these interviews for candidates for the Human 2.0 project. And they keep introducing all these people like, oh man, these are going to be the people in the rest of the film. Well, not exactly. So basically they all wash out and you end up with one guy who, he's wheelchair bound and he's just like, man, I really wanted to do something with my life. And because of my disability, I'm never really going to be able to do that. You're offering me a chance to achieve my dreams. Personally, I think having my brain in a robot body is amazing concept. I love that idea. I'm not ready for it yet. Ask me when I'm like 75 or 80. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm all for it. Okay. So, all right. So he's, we hear about him, what is going on with him, what some of his background is, what his goals are. All right. And he successfully becomes the first, person to get the transplant. And then what happens?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
They didn't test it well enough.
They didn't test it well enough.
And the suit rejected his biological brain.
Basic Oregon.
The only function it's supposed to do is to accept a biological brain.
Basic donor, organ donor rejection is such a basic common thing. And then they spend several minutes with more like computer animations showing about, how they just magically got around that real quick.
They pumped the wobbly fluid
They just pumped some wobbly fluid into the it just doesn't matter. Like
it really bothered me.
Yeah.
We've mentioned it a couple times, but this human concept, they keep calling 2.0.
2.0, which would be technically correct.
I know, but everyone calls it 2.0. Everyone calls everything 2.0.
If you're like a normal person, Ken, with normal thoughts and feelings and not the director and writer of this film, you would know that.
It was 2.0.
But it's 2.0. But
2.0 is just 2.
Okay. So, fair. But human 2 would sound also kind of silly. But let's be fair for a moment. Back in the 60s, the second manned spacecraft that NASA ever developed was called Gemini. Not Gemini. It was Project Gemini. Mm-hmm. That's how they referred to it back then. I don't know how people today would refer to that, but if you look at any of the recorded or audio or film production materials from that period, it's all Project Gemini. So there is a precedent for the scientific community saying things odd or more peculiarly than we might otherwise in common language. So I will let that one slide, but you're not wrong. Yeah. You're not wrong.
It bothered me. Even if it is technically okay, it just bothered me.
1.0, 2.0, 3.0. I mean, think about like Windows, Windows software development.
Remember when we used Windows 3.0? Windows 8.0. Do you remember that?
Windows 7.0.
Anyway, that's a very small thing.
The band's
in a sea of just boring, absolute crap. It wasn't even. You could have had people say interesting things. They didn't. They were all wishy-washy, know nothing, scientific babble people. Like, I really hope this is gonna work. This is what's going to happen now. I hope this is going to work when we do this.
You know what's great is we haven't even gotten to like the big black orbs yet.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to anything that happened. And neither had the story.
And we're like, what, 30 minutes or so into our record time right now.
So yeah,
And
so something appears in the sky,
hundreds of somethings.
and they're all black, liquidy, kind of smoky orbs.
You're right, liquidy, smoky, but also digitized and pixelated.
Yes, they don't look good.
They don't look good. Nothing in this film looks good. It looks like it should look good.
Yeah.
Man.
There's a couple times where things I noticed, they rendered the animation, and on the last frame, they stay on it a little bit too long. So like it should be like a frame, next scene, and it was like frame, same frame, next scene kind of thing. It's like
you do.
something was animated and then it stopped being animated right before they cut into the next thing.
Got to save those dollars, you know. This $1.0, or sorry, $1.0.
So anyway, there's these big, terrible looking orbs in the sky, and no one knows what they are. They're obviously somehow related to the portal thing.
Well, they came out of the void, and just randomly just showed up everywhere, and they've just been hovering in the sky. And what's great too is about this film, they never actually say how far the void is from Earth. I mean, it looks like it's right smack there.
Yeah.
You know, like the moon's like 250,000 miles away. You know, the void looks like it could be like 100,000 miles. I mean, it looks really, really close.
Mm-hmm.
And these giant black orbs, you know, are the size of like, you know, small cities, and they're just kind of hanging out. And so that's like the background while all this other boring crap is going on.
Yeah. And they keep going like, oh, like we're on a tight time schedule, and like how they don't know anything's going to happen.
They don't.
Or when it's going to happen or why it's going to happen. But somehow we're on this tight schedule on this mission, and we've got to rush to get it done. But nothing's happening.
Nothing's happening. The orbs are they're just smoking and flowing and digitizing up in space.
For literally weeks.
For months even. And, you know, like the doctor who did the first failed, you know, transplant, he even's like, you know, we're being rushed here. We need more time. And I'm watching this thing and I'm like, yeah, they need more time, you know. And at one point, Mr. Gray-haired, angry face Nigel, he's all like, you know, we have to launch within a week. We have to launch in a week, and it's like, no, they don't, and they don't. That point is just completely inconsequential, and they just keep moving on, and then they end up launching when they feel this, you know, this other human 2.0 is ready, which is like several weeks after. It's like, we got to know right away. We got to know right away. We got to know right away. And that's a really great example of like the problem like with corporate America too.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, oh my God, we need everything done right this fucking second. No, you don't. No, you don't.
Yeah.
Things can take time.
And that's another note I want to mention real quick, is that I think at the end it's supposed to be inspirational. I know we haven't gotten to the end yet.
Yeah, we haven't.
It's supposed to be inspirational.
That's
but
a
it's
laugh.
really, really not. It's really very dark in the way that like you're like corporations and like all the same crap, and this is supposed to be anyway.
I got you. So
it really stood out to me.
But we'll get back to that. So
so there's they finally launched the damn rocket. It's got two of these robot people in it. One of them the military sent that has weapons in it, and the other one that the scientists sent that has the astrophysicist lady in it. Cosmologist. I'm sorry. I keep saying the wrong thing.
That was what she. Well, you know, they're close. So, you know, so they go through this void / wormhole. I mean, to call it a void seems kind of. I don't like that term. I'm just going to take some issue with that term because it's bright and it's beautiful and sparkly, and it's everything that a void isn't. And every time that we see a representation of the void, it is absolutely teeming with energy and action and event.
It looks more like a fantasy portal.
It does.
You know, it looks magical kind of.
Yeah. So like when they refer to it in another time as a wormhole, it's like, okay, yeah, that could be a wormhole.
Yeah.
It could be a lot of other things. Calling it a void is stupid. But again, I digress. So they send the ship through the a really wonky looking ship, which I swear they ripped right out of Interstellar.
Mm.
A very the film Interstellar.
Yeah.
It's like, that bugged me. So they basically take that ship design and send a smaller version of it through this wormhole. And you see just, a little bit of, and it's funny because right before that happened, you and I were like placing bets, like they're going to just drag this movie out. And the last thing that we're going to see is them going into the void and then the roll credits. And I actually think I would have preferred that as a film, and almost. So so they go, you see them for a minute. All right. And then, they lose contact, whatever, signal ends. And then, back to more talking, Lady Director Hillary Clinton is telling us that, oh my God, we might not hear from them for days or weeks or months or decades. I mean, we got no idea. They were in such a rush. To get this ship launched. And first off, the ship may never return. The ship may not return for decades, may not return for years. They have no idea.
And they have no way of knowing.
Which again underscores why the rush and the hurry and the urgency, when all other things being equal, things are pretty stable. And in the interim, while they're all, the spacecraft, which they never name, by the way, that seems kind of a waste. When the spacecraft, I guess it's the spacecraft from the Space Agency, Inc.
From the beyond.
From the beyond. Oh my God. Did we ever name this film?
I think we did.
Yeah, if we didn't, it's called The Beyond, and we're beyond over it. So the lady director, Hillary Clinton, goes and talks to her daughter, who apparently was friends with the lady who became a human 2.0. And she basically tells her, like, oh yeah, she died. There was a problem with the rocket. And I'm watching this. I'm like, this is completely unnecessary. Just tell her she's missing. Why do you have to tell her she died? You don't know that she died. You don't know that she's not never coming back. And if you were that sure that she wasn't coming back, why did you send her? Just terrible, terrible writing. But as it turns out, they're back 5 days later. It never, and even though the woman is all upset that, well, not necessarily upset, but just openly talking about how she just lied to her daughter, they never revisit that. No. It's just, oh yeah, the ship came back 5 days later. And, they recover the spacecraft, which is in the Atlantic Ocean. They find, Jessica, the human 2.0. The military version, human 2.0, is missing. Gee, I wonder what happened.
So when they recover Jessica, they can access her memories because she's partly computer. So they start decoding memories, and they find first of all, they find just generic, weird kind of readings. And they have to wait for her to reboot her brain to heal. And during this time, the military gets restless, and they start firing their weapons into the black smoke things for no apparently reason.
And not just weapons. Let's be honest here.
Well, they started with small arms, which is,
little pea shooters.
That's always a good way to fight an intergalactic being.
Yeah, just take your M16 and just start. Embarrassing.
They fired rocket launchers, ground to air missiles. They had attack helicopters, and it didn't do anything. And they just moved on. That's just a thing that happens, so we can show some footage of people shooting.
To make it seem like there's a world around the events of the pseudo-documentary to keep us entertained.
So anyway, Jessica starts getting her memories back. Or does the other thing happen first? She doesn't get her memories back till after. I completely forgot.
She remembers a little bit.
She just remembers a tiny little bit until it turns that there's debris coming from somewhere else.
Here's... Okay, so
they spent so much freaking time in this movie explaining crap that didn't matter at all. And how much time did they spend explaining the space debris, where it came from?
They didn't explain it at all. They showed. Now here's where this film's awful special effects really do this film a disservice. So shortly after she's recovered, they're able to download bits and pieces at a time of her memory, and they're able to reconstruct a couple of things. But they don't have the full story yet, right? And she tells them some things that she experienced when she did make contact and everything. Even though nobody believes her yet because she may have PTSD, whatever. Mr. Angry
That's right.
Face. Mr. Angry Face doesn't know if she can be trusted.
She does have a memory where she sees the astronaut that got lost.
Yes.
So that's what kind of sets them off as far as is she stable? Like, are these memories? Is a fantasy she had?
And all that he telekinetically telepathically told her was everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
That is the whole sum of her trip. Into the void. Was just, oh, hey, it's going to be all okay. So meanwhile,
that was the first contact.
So that was the first contact that we see anyway, with these alien or extraterrestrial intelligences, which we, through that, at least, from her perspective, we can determine that that's what they are. Meanwhile, you just see some random footage of like a, planetary observation probe. Okay. And then you see some random, so I was looking at this and the entire time I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's what looks to be like two Earth's moons in the frame.
Yeah.
And one like disintegrates and the other one looks like something else weird is happening. And it's not clear what it is because they use that stupid ass blurry effect.
Yeah.
Right? Because I was actually baffled by what I was trying to figure. I couldn't figure out what I was seeing. Mm-hmm. It was just a big blurry mess. All right. And they had already talked about like gravity waves and other stuff emanating from the void before. So it's like, I wasn't sure, like, was the void doing something?
Right.
Was the void sending something out? I don't know. Who knows? So in any event, a moon or moons or something blows up, is disintegrated, is torn apart by a mechanism that is never revealed, never explained, never even mentioned.
And not related to this other portal at all.
Unrelated to every other event in the film. Completely unrelated to anything else that just went on. This happens.
It's like some natural phenomenon.
Like the moon just suddenly decided to blow the fuck up and just wrench itself apart and God knows what. And then you see all these, like these fiery debris trails in our atmosphere of just destroying things left and right. And then, back in their little Space Agency Incorporated mission control, you see what, I swear to God, it looked like asteroid graphics from like the old Atari game of like hitting things. And it was just, that's when I realized, something actually like blew up. And something's actually, that was the set. Well, yeah, satellites were getting blown up and hit by something. And
then the space station was in the line of fire. It's just, they're counting down the meters before they're going to be struck by this debris.
Now, here's the funny thing. So, so we're like, oh my God, 25 meters, 15 meters, 10 meters. Ken, in space, objects, so the International Space Station orbits the planet at over 17,000 miles an hour. For our, our European and other folks listening, I don't know what that translates into kilometers per hour. You'll have to forgive me. But it's over 17,000 miles per hour in orbit, right? Now, something traveling in a debris field like that, you would assume would probably be traveling at a comparable rate.
Right.
And they're counting down like a few meters at a time every few seconds. It seems unlikely. Who knows what the relative velocities were?
You have two moving targets.
You have two moving targets. Maybe, they were kind of running somewhat parallel to each other. I don't know. beside the point. A piece of debris, who knows what it was from, where this piece of a moon or a satellite is like literally within a gnat's ass of the International Space Station, but it gets magically saved.
So the smoke liquid, really terribly rendered orbs, suddenly kind of break apart into these small, pixely chunks and form what I can only describe as giant pillar shields all around Earth. And all the debris gets deflected and destroyed by these, whatever it is, it ends up being the alien presence.
Yeah, it looked like lava plumes or something that had solidified. That was the best way I could say it. But yes, you have all these meteors and asteroids, whatever, crashing into these things and just kind of petering off. How does that save the International Space Station, though? Because it's hundreds of meters.
Well,
the
smoke particles covered it like a blanket.
Oh, is that what? Did I miss that part?
Like a warm hug. They never showed it.
They never. Okay, you just have to assume.
Yeah. They saved the day. You see, because that's what the point of the movie is that the aliens saved the day.
They saved the day, all right.
Or so I thought was the point.
Oh, we got our little twist ending, don't we?
And then it kept going. And that wasn't the end?
Because at that point, I mean, I checked the time and we had at least 12 minutes more to go. Which, of course, anytime we check the time on a film, that's bad.
Which in a movie like this, that means at least 75% is not going to be dialogue of that time.
And we were very unhappy at that revelation that we still had 12 more minutes. And so what happens in these last 12 minutes? Well, Mr. Missing astronaut from the very beginning of the film that Jessica saw on the other side of that wormhole is magically wandering around the Arizona desert now, happy as a clam, not knowing what the hell's going on. The guy that they wrote off is dead. And then what else? The black, inky, pillory, globular, smoky entity starts gobbling up all the other planets in the solar system, and they make a new Earth. Literally 6 or 7 blocks down the road from the current Earth.
It's hilariously close.
So close, the tidal waves would drown everyone all over the world. It would destroy the Sahara Desert. Florida would be flooded. It would throw this planet into an absolute chaotic mess. I mean, it was closer than the moon is.
But this is the gift from the aliens, is that they gave us a new planet.
Oh, there's a new planet.
And that is the moral of the story, is that we'll have a new planet and that'll be good. And the aliens will come back one day and we'll all be happy together.
And the great thing too is they don't send any. Who did they send first to this new planet?
The Human 2.0.
Yes, several of them, and quite a few of them, in fact. And they show you a few scenes over a few years.
Now, why do they keep making these things?
Why do they keep making them? That is it.
It was a one-time special event that they needed this to go through a wormhole. Why can't they just send the people?
Well, the military had already been developing this for some time, so who knows on that one.
But they're all scientist people, not the military ones.
Supposedly, even the military is the Army Corps of Engineers. Maybe they just sent a bunch of those guys over there, But it does beg the question because they tell you in the film, it's we sent probes there and everything, and it's ideal for human life. So we're going to send not pure human life. We're going to send a bunch of brains in robot bodies. Why? There's no reason for it. There is no reason, Ken.
No. Mm-mm.
There's no reason that this film should have been made. There is no reason that we should have watched it. And there is even less reason that we should be talking about it still.
It suffers from all of the hallmarks of the last movie we watched by this guy. First of all, which is obvious because it's the same person, but of these terrible sci-fi movies where it's like someone has an idea. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we had a movie about brains and robot bodies and how that was like, the solution to a problem. And, the aliens, they welcomed us and they gave us a new planet. And it's like, how I'm going to make all that happen? I'm going to make a really boring ass, really straight played documentary. It's like someone thought that was a really good idea.
I said this already. I'm going to restate this. I love documentaries, Ken. If this was a documentary that I saw like somewhere on Netflix that was suggested to me, I would have turned it off within 10 minutes.
Yeah. Because in a documentary, there's characters. It's not a traditional character in that it's a real person, but there's people you care about and, a story you care about. And that's what makes it interesting. Not just data, not just facts, but the people and the events that make things interesting.
Yeah.
This has some events. The people aren't interesting.
People are not interesting. The people don't matter in this film.
The story should be interesting, but it's not.
Like, the idea of transhumanism is interesting to me. The idea of colonizing another world, fascinating. The idea of wormholes, fascinating. Ken, I love sci-fi, okay? I love exploring those ideas. I love seeing people's thoughts in those ideas, unless they come from this guy. I don't want to hear any more of his ideas. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
I don't want to know what he thinks about a box of Crayola crayons. He would find a way to ruin that for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just going back to the documentary thing for a moment. I watched it must have been a 12-part, several years ago, I watched like a 12-part episode series called The Polar Sea. And it was about a few different people trying to make the summer trek around the Northwest Passage in the Canadian Arctic. And that was absolutely fascinating. Some were very average people. One was like a cruise ship. One was a family. Another was just some guy whose buddies invited him, and then he went, and then his buddies bailed, and he kept going, even on foot at times. That was fascinating. And that was many more hours than this was. And there is a way to keep people entertained and to give them something worth watching. And I really hope that someday if this guy keeps making films, I hope that he learns how to do that, because he hasn't gotten there yet.
It's a lost cause. It's a lost cause. He doesn't have the chops.
He's got no chops. All right, so to wrap a couple things up. So we got one thing I'd like to cover. Our most useless or extraneous characters. I think almost all of them. I think we can
all the
agree on
talking
that.
heads could be swapped with anyone else and it wouldn't matter.
Best performance in the film, I believe at one point there was a scene in a garden and there was an orange cat on a lady's lap. I give the cat best performance in this.
The cat looked exactly like I felt.
Just absolutely dejected and over it.
And not caring about anything. Just hanging out.
That cat was the spirit animal for the audience in this film. And let me see, any other criteria that we didn't cover? I think we got just about all the bases there. I mean, the music's forgettable.
Yeah.
Special effects stock. I mean,
yeah.
There's none of the people in this film have done anything else that I've seen that I could comment on, so I can't even extrapolate or interrelate to that. So I think that we're going to call it a night on this one.
The thought I'd like to leave with people is that there's a lot of things you can get for free. And this is not something worth having for free.
Skip this one. I do tend to, by chance or luck or whatever, pick a lot of bad movies on this channel. Most of those are worth watching like once. Most of those have some redeeming fun element.
Even ones we didn't like were sometimes worth one view.
They're worth one view for some reason. This was an ordeal to get through. This is work. This took effort to get me to not turn it off. I had to keep myself from turning it off.
Yeah.
Because once we pick a movie, well, that's what we're stuck with.
Yeah.
For better or worse.
I've instated a rule that we will not watch anything else by this filmmaker.
No, we won't. We're gonna no. If we see
Never
his
again
name
in my life.
If I see his name crop up again, I That's going to be called the DeLull rule. We see his name, click. We're going to pick something else. Oh, like, maybe the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I haven't seen that one ever. I bet that's
true.
a much better film than
That's
this.
true. That would qualify.
That would qualify. Or the Pink Panther. It got, anything, All right. If you enjoyed this segment, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us wherever you're listening. What are some of the other platforms that people can hear us on, Ken?
Yes. You can hear us on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher, and of course at omstockroom.com. You can find us streaming on that website as well as links to everywhere else.
That's wonderful. And we'll have a new episode up every Wednesday. So, please just check us out and let us know what you're thinking of our episodes, what you're thinking of some of these movies that we're covering. Do you disagree? Do you agree? Are our analysis spot on? I don't know. I'd be interested to read some of your comments, especially on the YouTube channel. Let us know what you're thinking. So that's a wrap. Thank you for tuning in to Complimentary Cinema here on the O&M Stockroom. We're your hosts, Brian McGarry
And Ken O'Malley.
and we'll see you next week.